Hello, everybody. Oh, no. It seems that we have some technical issues here. Victor, can you please help me?
Yes, sure. Why don't you check your video cable?
Yes, but I don't think that's the problem. It worked just moments ago.
So maybe it's your adapter. Why don't you change it? We have another one, I think.
Yes, but you know, I have an old Mac Pro from 2009, and the new adapter does not suit it at all.
So why don't you email me your presentation? We could use my laptop. I will go for it.
Yes, but it's too big, you know, 20 megabytes, and it cannot be emailed.
Why don't you use USB for that?
Yes, but you know, USB drive is blocked on my computer. We have very strict security rules at my company. Oh, you see, nobody can help me. Thank you, Victor. So, let's see what happened here. I was looking for help, and Victor was so nice and kind, and he was offering a help. So, he suggested several very good things to do with the why don't you, but I've rejected every single suggestion with yes, but, and I had some reasonable reasons. So we were exchanging that why don't you and yes, but for some time, like playing ping pong, you know, and all of a sudden I said, well, you're a great help. And then confused. What did he wrong? Do you recognize this type of communication? You're trying to help someone, you're suggesting a lot of good things, but he's rejecting every single suggestion. And all of a sudden, communication is broken. Do you recognize, have you ended up in such conversation? How did it go? Did you solve the problem? Sometimes, but usually not. So something is fishy with that why don't you question. Let's ask Lisa Atkins. She's talking about Agile coaching, giving a lot of workshop lessons, and she's really very good Agile coach. And she says, avoid asking why don't you questions. It can be too offensive. But was it really offensive in this case? I agree, sometimes it can be offensive when you ask someone, why don't you do that, why don't you do that, etc. But in this case, Victor was so nice and kind, and he really wanted to help me. So it must be something else with that fishy why don't you question. In fact, I find the correct answer in this nice book with the name Transactional Analysis. It was written a long time ago, 1964, by psychiatrist Eric Berne. He was a psychiatrist, but I think he was a mathematician deep inside because he made a very nice mathematical model, how we are modeled and how we communicate with the others. So it's a behavioral theory, and he says that transaction is exchange of communication between two people. Usually it's words, things that we are saying to each other, but it can be also facial expression, body language, and etc. So he analyzed these transactions and realized that they're repeatable. So a lot of our communication, in fact, it's predictable. It consists of repeatable series of transactions. But before we dig in transactions and how we exchange communication, we have to see how we are modeled. What do we have for our inner architecture? And the good news for us who work with the software development is that we have a 3 layers architecture. Although Eric Berne didn't put that exactly in that way, he said that we have 3 ego states. When a child is born, it starts directly developing its parent ego state. What does it mean? Small baby or small child receiving a lot of instructions and directions from parents. Do that, don't do that. If you take that glass, it can be broken. And everything is written in our parent ego state. So we can say that the parent ego state consists of recordings of imposed unrequested external events. So we can say it's a thought life concept. At the same time, we start developing child ego states. our feelings and reactions on those external events. So it's internal feelings which corresponds to those external events. So we can say that child ego state, in fact, it's a felt life concept. When we grow up around 5 years old, we are trying to do things by our own. We are experimenting things, testing things, and then we start developing adult parent state. It's in fact consists of exploration. Maybe parents told us to do something or not to do something, but now we discovered by our own it should be done like that or not. So we can say that adult ego state, it's thought life concept. So we have a parent, adult, child ego state. Parent ego state wants to be superior, as we parents want to do all the time. Adult ego state wants to be competent, because that part knows the things, how it works. And the child part wants to be liked. It's that part of us which is happy when we get like on internet, on Facebook or LinkedIn. And the most important, we are shifting between three states all the time. For example, now when I'm presenting, I'm talking about transactional analysis. I'm telling you some facts. So I'm talking from my adult ego state. From time to time, I'm telling you, oh, please remember this. And it's coming from my parent ego state. And I'm smiling from time to time because I want you to like me and my presentation. So I'm switching between three states all the time. Another important thing for adult ego state, it's in response on here and now. It means, in fact, it works like a computer. It's gathering data from the outer world, and all the time it's validating with the things that have been recorded in our parent ego state. Is it still true and applicable? Should I accept or reject that? And also, it's testing feelings. Are they still appropriate or not? And two important outputs from adult ego state, it's decisions and probability estimating. But it was a lot of theory. Let's see how it works in practice. PAC model. When I say, listen to me now, where does it come from? Which parent? Sorry. Very good, very good. But if I say, it's so boring, I don't want to listen anymore. Child. If I say, are you sure that you understand that? Should I repeat it? Where does it come from? Parent. If I say, yes, please, I didn't hear. Child. And if I say, considering what I know, we can assume, blah, 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 where does it come from? Adult. So, parent ego state. Do you see any difference between listen to me now and should I repeat it? Yes, here's much more like controlling parent, which is giving directions. And here is much more like nurturing parent, taking care about someone. Also, for child ego state, if you say, it's so boring, I don't want to listen anymore. It's like a free child. I said what I thought. But yes, please, can you repeat? It's like we are at school and I'm listening to my teacher. It's adapted child. So we come to that extended PAC model that in fact parent ego state consists of two parts, controlling parent and nurturing parent. And each of the parts has both positive and negative sides. Controlling parent, positive sides are that it's constructive and organizing. Negative sides is that it's autocratic and fault-finding. Nurturing parent, positive sides it's supportive and caring. Negative sides that it's smoothering and overprotective. Child ego state has also two sides, adapted and free child, and also positive and negative sides. Positive is that it's assertive and cooperative. Negative sides is that it's fearful and compliant. Regarding free child, Positive, that it's creative and curious. Negative is that it's egocentric and wild. So please remember this extended PAC model. But now I felt like I have been talking about transactional analysis and I haven't presented myself. I'm coming from family with a mother engineer and father mathematician, so you can imagine what they wrote in my parent ego state. But when I grew up, when my adult ego state validated all those learning, I was thinking, oh, in fact, they were right. Software development, that's cool stuff. Let's go for it. So I have been working with the software development for 20 years, mainly as a developer and architect. So, and the last 15 years, I have been developing transaction-based financial systems. 15 years ago, my free child discovered the agile software development. So I got a lot of good ideas and was able to implement many creative solutions. So I was operating between that adult and child ego state, and I was happy. But for 2 years ago, I became a manager, or I was informal agile leader for a longer period of time. And then I was thinking, although decision-making and probability estimating is coming from adult parent state, adult ego state, people management comes from parent ego state, from my point of view. So in order to become a better agile leader, I was trying to learn more about agile leadership. And then I found a very good article written by Michael Hammond and Michael Spade. Anyone who read this article, The Agile Leader? It's an excellent article, and a lot of very nice ideas and applicable. But there is one thing that really caught my eye. They're saying that in order to become better agile leaders, we have to make a shift from traditional leadership style, being directive, managing just for results and performances, to become catalyzing leadership style, meaning that we should design environment which will create a result. So instead of focusing just on results, and my team should perform like that or like that, you should create such environment where all people feel motivated and creative, and results will come by itself. And the main characteristics for directive leadership style is telling, directing, controlling. For catalyzing is creating conditions, designing structures, introducing practices. But when I saw this picture, then I was thinking, with my knowledge about transactional analysis, how can it be mapped? Look at this. Controlling parent, it's in fact then directive leadership style. Catalyzing is that nurturing. But there is one thing that I was also thinking. Controlling, many people are talking how controlling is not good, but in fact it's not completely true, because there are positive sides of being controlling when you are organized and constructive. So from my point of view, agile leadership comes from those two parts: positive part of controlling parent and positive part of nurturing parent. What does it mean in practice when you are agile leader at work? And someone comes and say, oh, I cannot do this essay or write this report. If you're acting from your negative controlling parent, you're saying, oh, you're always complaining. But if you're reacting from your positive controlling parent, then you say, I'm sure it might be difficult, but give it a go. If you are reacting from your nurturing negative parent, then you say, let me sort it out for you. But positive nurturing parent is saying, is there anything you would like me to do? And maybe you recognize this sentence because in many coaching courses, it's recommended to say so if someone asks you for help. So let's see some examples. It was just one-way communication, but communication consists of several directions. With knowing a PAC model, someone is saying something, sending stimulus, and the other person is sending the response. How are you? Fine, thank you. What do you think? where does those transactions went from which ego states? It was adult-adult communication. If someone says, you have to go to bed right now, and the second person says, oh, please, I just want to finish this. Where does it go, communication? Parent-child, exactly. Those type of transactions are called parallel transactions. You receive response from the same ego state where you send the stimulus. And usually those type of transactions can continue forever. So it's a good communication. But we have other type of transactions. For example, you ask the same question, how are you? But the second person is angry and say, why do you care? What happened here? You send from the adult ego state, but you received from child to parent. Or the second example, you are sitting at the dinner and someone said, can you pass the salt, please? Or you're saying that, and another person says, you should have realized that you needed salt before you sat down. Get it yourself. So you send transaction from adult ego state, but you received another answer. Those type of transactions are called crossed transactions. And usually when it happens, the communication is broken. And even if it is continual, usually it's not very good conversation, you can imagine. So usually when you get a cross transaction, the communication is broken. Another example. Some from your team are coming to you and say, how did you like my report? But you feel he is not so sure that he did a good job. And then you say, well, it was okay, although you don't think that he did a good job. It's adult-adult conversation. But there is some underlying transactions that are happening. At the same time, he's sending that hidden transaction. It wasn't good, wasn't it? And you are saying, I didn't like it much. So it's very complicated. It's not all transactions are not only parallel or crossed, we have even hidden transactions that are called split transactions. Or you ask someone, have you finished your report? We need that by the end of the day. And the second person saying, oh, I'm working on it, it will be ready soon. But in fact, you know that he hasn't finished job and he is tired and bored and he doesn't want to do that. So we also have that split transactions. So we have one message that is sent on the social level message, but you have an underlying psychological message. So we have three types of transactions: parallel, crossed, and split. And then when we analyze them, we can understand how we communicate with each other. It's really beautiful. It's like event log analysis. Do we have some people who are working actively with software development? You know, in my case, usually we have a transaction-based systems. For example, you send an order to stock exchange, and if everything goes well, you receive a reply. And then everything is nice and fine in the event log. Sometimes you send a transaction, but there is no reply. Something went wrong. It's like in the communication with people. Sometimes you say something, and you don't receive a reply. Or even worse, sometimes the complete event log gets read. It's also in the communication with people. You say something naive and simple, and all of a sudden the second person is... And then the communication is broken. What do you do when you receive a read event log? How you find a bug in your code? What do? You analyze all your previous transactions in order to find some pattern. What happened before that led to that error in the event log? It's the same thing what Eric Berne did in his transactional analysis. And he realized that some communication, exchange of transactions, has predefined patterns. So he analyzed communication, which ended up in a broken, bad communication, and he realized, but I could have predicted that, because there are some patterns in communication which lead to that broken communication. And he called that for games. And it's important to remember that all communication is not bad. Just some types of communication which end up in a dysfunctional communication are bad, and it's called a game. So he defines a game as an ongoing series of recurring set of transactions progressing to a well-defined, predictable outcome. And now, finally, I can answer your question. What is wrong with why don't you? In fact, it's the game. And it's a very typical game, and has the following pattern. The first person is looking for help, and the second person is offering the help. And he's saying, why don't you do that or don't do that? So it's adult transactions. The second person answers yes, but, and so on. But we have, in fact, split transactions, underlying from parent to child. From the beginning, the person who was looking for help, she or he was a victim. He needed help, and another person was a rescuer. But at a certain point of time, then another person who was looking for help all of a sudden say, oh, nobody can help me, or you're a great help. And the communication is broken, because that person said one cross transaction, and the communication is broken. It's called switch in the game, and cross up. The first person, he's surprised. What happened? I just wanted to help, and now I feel bad. Why does he feel bad? Because now the roles are changed. All of a sudden, that person who was a victim from the beginning became justified and superior, feeling, I showed you that you couldn't help me, and the second person feels the skilled and foolish. So now we have the pattern, and probably you recognize that pattern. So typically the games, some person starts a communication, it's like throwing the hook. With a certain sentences, it's trying to start the game. And if the second person answers in the correct way, like, why don't you, yes, but, it hooks to the bait, and the game starts. So in order to improve communication, to end up in the games, and why games are bad? Because they're not solving the problems. You know that you are going to end up in one ping-pong communication without solving the problem. Instead of hooking to the bait, you should send some reasonable answer. And then he cannot hook to that, to continue that type of conversation. How to do that? By sending an answer from adult ego state. Because most of games are played between parent and child ego states. So if you give some reasonable answer from adult ego state, the game cannot be continued. For example, in this case, how you can dismiss why don't you game? Someone is looking for help and say, I just can't do this essay. If you say, why don't you do that? You have started the game. You accepted his game or her game. But if you say, what do you think you will do about that? Instead of sending transaction from parent ego state, you are sending a reasonable answer from adult ego state. And the game is not continued. And hopefully, you're really going to find solution for your problem. Probably you recognize from the coaching courses those type of questions. And now you get explanations why you should ask in that way. Because you should send a question from your adult ego state in order not to end up in a game, which will not lead to solving the problems. There is a lot of games that Eric Berne described. There is another example. In every team, there is one person who is saying, oh, what can you expect from someone with such problems like I have? Maybe I'm sick or tired and I cannot do anything. And if you want to continue his game, you're confirming, yes, certainly not, you will get less tasks to do, and so on. And you are accepting his game. But if you say, I don't expect anything from you, what do you expect from yourself? Then the game is not started, and hopefully you will find a good answer on that. So Eric Berne wrote many nice books, and one of them is Games People Play, and I really recommend reading them, because you recognize many games because they start with the typical sentences. like, why don't you, yes, but, or see what you made me do. I'm only trying to help, and so on and so on. So it's really very easily recognizable, you can recognize very easily in the conversation if someone wants to start a game. So here's the book. I also have one copy with myself in my bag, so please come if you want to take a look at that book. And with the brain, which I have, I was thinking, yes, it's really very nice theory, but I would like to have some scientific proof. That for me, it sounds very logical, but I like to find some reason why it's really working, why we are functioning in that way. And fortunately, I found the answer in neuroscience. I really love neuroscience because usually psychologists and psychiatrists, they discover some behavioral patterns or the way how we behave. And 15, 20 years later, comes neuroscience with scientific proof and say we have those type of neurons and that's why we behave in the way how it is. Maybe you have heard about the mirror neuron systems. In our brain, they discover those mirror neuron system. It's a group of specialized neurons that mirrors the actions and behavior of the others. So that's why it's so easy to write down all other behaviors, and that's why we are usually playing the same games as our parents or our surrounding do. So there is a nice picture, I cannot explain that, unfortunately, where they're settled in our brain, but there are a lot of TED Talks and articles on the internet if you're interested to learn more about the mirror neuron system. But the good thing is, nothing is static. All those things, behavioral patterns that are written in our brain, it's not forever. It can be reprogrammed. So if we are conscious, if we think about that, we can behave in a different way. To wrap up my talk, I would like to point out the pros of the transactional analysis. First, Eric Berne uses that simple language. You understand directly what he wanted to describe. Parent, adult, child, all those names for the games. Why don't you? I'm just trying to help. So you understand directly what he wants to say. We can already apply that without going in some deep analysis. Because usually in psychology, you have to perform, if you really want to understand why someone behaves in the way how he behaves, you have to perform that root cause analysis, go to his childhood and find all the reasons. But transactional analysis helps me at work because when I'm sitting at the meeting, I don't have a time to analyze all other person's childhoods, but I can understand very soon which games they're playing. And then I'm aware of that, and then I know with that person I should answer in a different way in order not to accept his game. So, and we are coming to a very important point. Many people are talking about psychology and they're saying like, I have been working on myself a lot and I improved myself as a person, but it doesn't help because I cannot change the others. Yes, maybe you cannot change the others, but you can improve the general communication because if you don't accept other games, you are going to improve the communication. So that's good news with the transactional analysis. It's very applicable and just awareness of that and just that you think for a while before you answer, that you think, oh, controlling, nurturing parent, is it positive or negative? It's going to improve your communication at work. And don't forget, it's just one theory. So probably it cannot describe all problems and give answers on all your questions. But believe me, it's really very usable. Now I have a final question in my talk. Do you know what is the difference between invention and innovation? Yes, please. Okay, it's one definition. I would define it in the following way. Invention is when you discover something that is completely new, like when they discovered the wheel. But innovation is when you are using existing things and combine them in a new way in order to get some useful things. So innovation was when you use the wheel in the car. So I think that Eric Berne was a very good inventor by inventing transactional analysis theory. I really think that he deserved the Nobel Prize for that. And my role in it, I'm trying to be innovator and to use existing theory, transactional analysis, and agile coaching and agile leadership, and combine them in new way, and to give something useful that you can start using at work already tomorrow, and improve your leadership skills and communication with the others. Thank you for your time.